Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Friendly Neighbors, written by Sjanevardsson. The soft eddies of the air, normally only felt on bared dermis or by rustled hair, fur or feathers, were announced by the low whooshing sound of the air circulators, a sound that occurred at irregular intervals but was so quiet that living ears rarely, if ever, heard it over the sounds of normal activity. The sudden, shocked, still silence in the court was anything but normal. The tall, furry plaintiff's attorney, with 6 eyes and 4 ear slits, and too many joints in each of his 6 limbs and 4 grasping appendages, blinked all of his eyes at once. He was a Terran, and the Trade and Colonization Bureau of his government was suing the lone human woman, Ambassador Tara Washington, sitting in the dock in this courtroom on his homeworld.
Please expand on that answer.
Huh?
I ask you what specific training you received to fulfill your role as ambassador to humans, and you answered none. While I appreciate the concise answer, I would ask that you provide some explanation.
I have no specific ambassadorial training, other than what I've learned on the job from the other ambassadors. In fact, I consider Ilio, your own ambassador, Mr. Aeolius, a dear friend and mentor. The attorney paced between the dock and the plaintiff's desk, leaving behind a light scent of citrus and sandalwood, a human cologne that sold well among his people.
And yet, during a period where we are dealing with an invading force, you found it acceptable to cheat your dear friend and mentor in a trade deal that... Objection, leading,
the small crustacean-like defense attorney said in a whistling, high voice punctuated with a click of mandibles that the translator couldn't hide.
Sustained.
The lead judge, head of the panel of 3, all the same 6-limbed creatures as the plaintiff's attorney, gave a still-pacing attorney a 3-eyed glare.
Plaintiff's counsel is reminded to maintain decorum in this court.
He stopped pacing and nodded towards the bench.
Yes, Your Honors.
He stood before the plaintiff's desk and conferred his assistance and Unulu Ainunu, the president of the Terran Trade and Colonization Bureau, for a moment before continuing.
Ambassador, he asked, how would you define your job?
My current job, as ambassador?
Yes.
It is my job to represent the whole of humanity to the best of my ability. That includes forming friendly relations with those species we consider allies and trying to foster closer relations to those that we do not yet consider allies. I would guess the most important part to me is to approach everyone I meet as an ally or a possible future ally.
That is very noble. But could you explain what actions you take to foster closer relations?
It's often something as simple as inviting an ambassador or a visiting leader to tea or a gala. Sometimes it can mean broaching the subject of economic or other deals, or even working out details of those deals, with input from experts from both species, of course. The attorney stopped and tilted his head.
That sounds like a huge responsibility. How were you selected for such a position?
Tara shrugged, feeling small in the court chair in the dock, designed for taller beings, her feet dangling just above the ground. Wrong place, wrong time?
Could you please elaborate?
I was a maintenance tech on Hawking Station. That's where the United Human Systems headquarters are. Prior to my selection, each system was attempting to make deals with non-human systems, but getting the runaround because of our lack of seat in the Quadrant Coalition. The UHS, that is, decided that we needed a neutral ambassador that would represent humanity at large to the QC. Whoever they chose had to be someone not a citizen of any particular human system and be impartial as to the inner conflicts and dealings within the human systems. She stopped and took a sip of water that had been provided for her, grown tepid from the hours of sitting out. I was born on Hawking Station. My mother was an engineer from the Barnard system, but she died when I was still an infant. Since my mother had no existing family and my father was unknown, I was raised in a daycare centers of the station, the only orphan there. As such, I grew up with kids from every human system and had no strong opinions on any system, good or bad. Tara sighed. When they decided what kind of person they wanted for the job, I came to mind. Many of the young ambassadors had grown up with me on the station and knew that I was apolitical. I was young enough to serve for a long time, old enough to be mature about it, And I was right there. Like I said, wrong place, wrong time.
Accident of birth hardly seems a valid method for choosing a representative.
Objection, not a question. The whistling voice of the defense attorney piped in. Sustained. Plaintiff's counsel will refrain from providing commentary and stick to questioning. You are on a very weak limb with this panel and in danger of facing contempt and censure.
Yes, Your Honors.
He composed himself again.
And Master, I call your attention to Plaintiff's Exhibit 1. The trade deal signed by yourself, 7 human system leaders, Ambassador Ilio, Aelolius, and 6 Terran military leaders on galactic date 12395.763-11.
The document appeared as a large holograph in front of the bench, clearly legible from every point in the courtroom. Moving about the courtroom, it would seem the facing side of the document followed.
It's not a trade deal,
Tara said.
What was that?
The attorney asked.
It is not a trade deal. Then what is it?
It's an economic and military aid treaty between the members of the UHS and the Terran government.
This document has over 30 items related to tariffs, price caps, transport agreements, embargo rejections, and penalties for price fixing. If it's not a trade deal, then what is it?
Objection, asked and answered.
Withdrawn,
the attorney said, before the head judge could scold him yet again. He walked in front of the dock.
What are the major points of the agreement in your own words?
Tara smiled. 1. Special forces from several human militaries will provide training to Terran forces. 2. Weapons, ammunition, and equipment, including 3 mega-class hospital ships from several human systems, will be provided to those trained Terran forces in exchange for raw materials to make more. 3. Humans will set up permanent bases in the selected Terran systems, Oila High, where their training will take place. 4. Once the Terran military has enough of their own trainers, humans will cede these bases to the Terran military and provide only as many troops as the Terran government requests.
The 5th and final major point: for as long as humans are stationed in Terran space, the free travel of humans and Terrans between those species will not be prohibited or impeded except in cases of illegal travel, like someone fleeing from the law. Now, of these 5 major points you outlined, how many of the 34 trade items are directly related to those major points?
All of them are related to the one or more of the 5 major points.
What is the link between the human mining vessels in the Olahai asteroid field and those 5 major points?
The asteroid mining is taking place to both supply the raw materials for arms portion of the treaty, as well as the material for making the military bases, including an orbital base for training. The actual contract for that was not in the treaty, however. The allowance for such contracts is part of the treaty.
Seeing how the Olahai system was next for Eregian settlement, how was that system chosen for this treaty?
I cannot answer that, as I do not have insight into the inner workings of your government.
No further questions at this time?
The attorney sat down, the president of the Trade and Colonization Bureau whispering in his ear slits. The crustacean-like defense attorney hopped down off its chair and scuttled to the center of the courtroom, where it could be seen. It turned and eye-stalked towards the plaintiff's desk before focusing on the dock. It began its questioning, its voice high and whistling through the translator.
Ambassador, Washington, how many concessions did the humans make to get this treaty signed?
Well over 50, she said, although I don't know the exact number.
Were any of them a particular point of dismay?
Terra frowned. The biggest concessions were the removal of all the tariffs for Eretian durable goods throughout the human space, the lack of financial payment for their arms and equipment, and the use of a completely undeveloped system for the training bases. Sure, there were contractors that were pleased by that one, as it guaranteed work for them not only to build the bases, but all the needed infrastructure as well. The UHS has estimated the cost to humans in the trillions of credits. For their part, the Eretarians get a colony-ready world with military training, equipment, arms, and ammo, and they pay only for extracting the raw materials they are trading for the military goods.
Then why, it whistled, would the humans agree to such a treaty?
A couple of reasons for that. First, we share a large border of space with the Eretarians. The invaders on the other side of their space need to be dealt with for both their sake and ours. Also, aside from the training part of the treaty, it creates a few million jobs in human space: manufacturing, mining, construction, support, transportation, and so on. And those jobs can be spread amongst all the human systems.
What restrictions do the treaty place on Terran colonization in the Olohai system?
Only that the areas of the second planet designated for military installations and the security zone around them are off limits for habitation due to safety concerns. Other than that, none.
I find a question for you, Ambassador. Why were the trade provisions included as an inherent part of the treaty?
The attending military commanders and Ambassador Aloysius, in consultation with President Ainanu of the Trade and Colonization Board, determined that failing to secure those items as part of the treaty would leave them vulnerable to be overturned and endanger the treaty.
I would like to call your attention to the Defendant's Exhibit 1.
The new document floated in the center of the courtroom.
At the bottom of this document is a mark here,
it said, pointing at it.
What is that mark?
That is my initial stamp, verifying that I had read and understood the document.
What is this document?
It's an order from President Ainano, from Ambassador Ailelios, empowering him to sign the treaty on the government's behalf as long as he secured certain concessions.
And what were those concessions?
No direct monetary payments from the Irutian government to any human government, reduced restrictions on export of Irutian goods to human worlds, and humans would not alter any settled Terran worlds.
Was there anything else notable about this document?
I found it odd that President Ainanu called the treaty a simple military matter and not worthy of any more of the Bureau's time. In a document he knew other signatories would want to inspect before letting the ambassador take the place of the government representative. There was another hush over the courtroom. The defense attorney gestured and the document disappeared.
No further questions?
It scuttled back into the chair and climbed in. The judges conferred for only a moment before the head judge spoke up.
This court finds this case without merit, just as we dismissed a case of plaintiffs brought against Ambassador Ailelios. We find this to be a politically motivated waste of the court's time. It is the suggestion of the court that should the plaintiff find himself in a political tough spot, he should refrain from promises to future colonists and should take more active role in treaty negotiations. The fact that the human ambassador has made a deal with our government that greatly benefits us more than them, I find your attempt to paint her as a manipulative con distasteful. Plaintiff is to be charged for the court's time and all the defendant's legal fees. Dismissed.
Tara found Ilya waiting for her outside of the court and walked with him to the shuttle port.
Trillions of credits?
He asked. Yep, she answered.
Are you concerned that one or more of the human governments will come after you for this deal?
No. The leaders of the 7 largest human governments signed on it with the UHS's blessing, understanding that what it costs us in the short term will more than make up for in the future.
I still feel like I pulled one over on you. Just as the humans secured the mining contract in Orlai system, our own companies are already competing for contracts in human space. How do you figure you'll recover?
Every credit that your government pays for mining the ores goes into the economy at a level that generates jobs. In other words, into the pockets of working people, she shrugged. Add to that an increased market for our goods and services over the long term, and we'll make it back, plus some. Besides, it's good to have some friendly neighbors.
That it is,
Ilio said.
That it is.
End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnold, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Lightjock, Dragzoon WRE, and Lord Azrakal. Thank you very much.